Hi, Sue here, nice to be back with you again. This vlog is all about reading. I'm going to talk about what I've been doing with my 5-year-old little boy to get him reading and enjoying reading, even though he might be what some people would consider to be quite a reluctant reader. So we've started with something that he's very excited about at the moment, which is Star Wars. We've bought him some books, Lego phonics books. There are obviously lots of other phonics books available on the market, but these are the ones that we went for, and they've worked really well for him so far. They've got very exciting titles like To the Rescue and That's a Trap, and each book focuses on a different set of phonics sounds. So this one, That's a Trap, focuses on the short A sounds. Now, I have to be honest, I was slightly arrogant in my assumption that it would be quite easy to teach my 5-year-old to read, because I was an English teacher for about 20 years, and I was wrong. So my original plan was to go page by page with him, reading each page at a time. Most of the words are words that he's familiar with, he's fairly confident with. However, the reason that didn't go to plan was because actually the story is so exciting, he wants to get to the action. And because he finds it quite tricky to decode the text and read some of these words, he got very frustrated very quickly. So our compromise was that I would read most of the words on the page and he would read just the words with the short A vowel sound, which was the focus of that reading session. So words like cat, glad, grab, good old northern vowels there, we're in Yorkshire after all. So he got the hang of doing those sounds really quite well. We've probably spent 10 minutes on that maximum. He's only 5, so his concentration span is probably similar to that of a gnat. We then had a look at the workbook. These are really, really handy. They go with the phonics books. We've got Yoda on the front here. So he really enjoyed these activities. There's rhyming matches where you find a word that rhymes with the original word that you're looking at. So we've got snack and back, for example. And then he also had a go at writing out some of the words. You can see his handwriting there, writing out some of the words to make a paragraph make sense. That probably took 5 to 10 minutes maximum. Then he needed an emergency ham sandwich and a run around with a football. And once he'd composed himself, we then came back to do a little bit of writing practice. Now, getting him to write on paper with a pen is quite a challenge at the moment. I think he's quite happy doing it at school, but he doesn't see that as something that he wants to do at home. So my cunning plan was to buy one of these. I imagine lots of you, if you're a parent like me, probably sort of late 30s, early 40s, had one of these as a kid, an Etch A Sketch, about a £5 online. It's been an absolute godsend because he's quite happy to write on here, because he can very easily erase it if he makes a mistake, and he can also do all sorts of pictures around what he's written, and then we can take a photo of it if it's something he's really proud of on my phone, and then erase it, and we're not wasting loads of paper as we're going. Now, I have a cunning plan with the Etch A Sketch. My friend Simon Hunt, who is a fantastic primary school teacher over in Manchester, has recommended an app called Seeing AI. Now, that was originally developed for people with a visual impairment, and it can decipher text, both in books but also handwriting. Will is quite a sensitive little chap, and if he feels that he's being criticised, he just disengages and will not get involved any further with what you're asking him to do. So rather than myself or my other half comment on whether or not we can read his writing on the Etch A Sketch, this week we're going to have a go with the app and see if Seeing AI can read his handwriting. And of course, if it can, that's going to make him feel fantastic. So I will let you know the next time we're together how that's gone. The other things that we've been doing yesterday in terms of his reading might not seem to be obvious reading things. And I suppose it's kind of reading by stealth. So, for example, we went for a really big walk because we live up near the Yorkshire Dales. It's really, really pretty. We walk from home, and Will is very interested in the cat at the moment, probably because our world is quite narrow in lockdown. So he and Purdy the cat have developed a real bond, and it's Purdy's birthday in August. So on the walk, Will decided to collect a range of different feathers for Purdy's birthday present. He's planning on making a toy bird, so we've got a selection of feathers here. But what we were able to do whilst we were collecting the feathers was use some describing words, some adjectives, to describe the feathers as we went along. So he was using all sorts of great adjectives like fluffy, spiky, jagged, all kinds of different words. And again, that conversation that we're having is actually by stealth improving his understanding of language and therefore starting to improve his reading, because the more he hears interesting words and develops that interest in those words, the more likely he is to recognise them when we're reading them together. One thing that I really want to get across about reading with young children, and in fact actually also arguably with older children too, is that not all reading has to be of words. And it doesn't all have to be in a kind of sitting down, reading together formal way. So he really loves Lego, and he's brilliant at reading the instructions for putting together a Lego model. And you may well have a child who also perhaps doesn't feel very confident with reading words yet, but could follow instructions. That's an opportunity to really praise the fact that he is reading. You read that really well. Look how accurate your model is. We're getting across this idea that reading is to do with interpreting and decoding and understanding whatever the material is. And it may be a text, or it may be something that's in images or whatever, or a film. Something like that they're interested in is a really good way of keeping them interested in reading. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is a little bit of research around this. There's been years and years of research into what gets kids reading and what keeps them reading, and also into what puts them off. And one of the things that we know for sure is that if we force young children particularly to try and read too much too early, we set ourselves up for failure. We set them up to disengage, because actually the reason that Will got frustrated trying to read so much of the Star Wars story on his own was because he was focusing so much at the word level on those individual words that there was no sense of how they fitted into the wider story. There was no meaning there. And actually, it makes much more sense to do a little bit, maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day, practicing a few keywords that you want to focus on with a young child, and then thinking about other ways that you can get them reading. And actually the biggest influence on children's reading is modelling by parents. Kids don't do what we say, kids do what we do. If you want your child to read, you've got to read, and they've got to see you reading and finding it useful and enjoying it. So it might be that you read a recipe with them. So last week we baked some cakes because Will loves baking, and we needed a recipe book to be able to find out how to bake them. That worked really well. Reading had a purpose, it was useful. The other thing I want to mention about this as well is about boys reading. We are an all-mum household, and Will doesn't have a male role model in our house to watch doing the reading. So actually we have to work quite hard for him to see other men reading and enjoying reading. So it might be that he'll see Grandad reading the paper when we go visiting at Grandma and Grandad's house, or he'll see his uncle reading something perhaps on his phone. But it's important, particularly for boys, as they get older through school, that they see reading as something that is done by men, and men that they see as role models. Reading is not a girly thing to do. It's not a female preserve. Okay, so the next thing that I just want to mention as well is how we end our days every day. And I imagine, like lots of us, by the end of the day, the nice thing to do is to just snuggle up with a book, share that story time together, and just have the final experience in Will's life each day as a comfort, as a reassurance, as a really enjoyable moment to share a story. C.S. Lewis once said, "We read to know that we're not alone." And I think during lockdown that could not be more poignant. The book that we're reading this week is this one, and I guess loads of you are probably also reading this. It's the Charlie Mackesy book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, or as Will calls it, Cake Mole, because he loves the mole, and the mole sees a lot of comfort in cake, and I think he's got a point there. When we're reading this, there's a great opportunity to read the images and talk about some of the metaphors in it. So we've got a picture here of the boy galloping along on the horse, and the text says, "When the dark clouds come, keep going." And I think that's a brilliant message for all of us this week. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I will be back next week. I'll let you know how Seeing AI has gone in terms of deciphering Will's handwriting. Next time we'll be talking about coping with tricky behaviour during lockdown and keeping ourselves sane whilst the children are pushing all of our buttons and testing all the boundaries. Look after yourselves. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.